Hey Scrabble fans, Will Anderson here. Everybody knows when you get sick, you call a doctor. But when things go wrong in a game of Scrabble, there's nobody to call. Until now, because Doctor Scrabble is here. I'm here to help you with maladies such as vowelitis, consonant overload, stuffed up boards, fuzzy board vision, and anything else Scrabble related on your mind. So our first question for this episode comes from David Lasafra, who sent in this board for me to take a look at. And he writes that he's got a clunky rack on a difficult board, and he wonders whether TIE, burning the blank as an E, hooking fade, would be a waste of a blank, or whether exchanging tiles might be better. So first of all, David is absolutely right about both his rack and the board. So take a look at these V's out in space here with vote and van. So because there are no two-letter words with a V in them, it's really constricting the accessible space on this board. Look how much of the board is inaccessible. That's why it feels so constricted to David. So he's absolutely right about the board being difficult. The real trick for him to assessing this situation is knowing the fady hook, right? So fad takes a Y hook in the dictionary that David is playing, the Collins dictionary. Because he's playing in Collins, you can actually place a Y at the end of fad on the board and access the triple word score without having to use your blank. So something like guy in that spot is going to score over 30 points and keep that blank for later. It looks like a really good option here. But many of you are probably saying, I've never heard of fady. I don't know that word. What do I do if I don't know it? And David's instincts are completely correct here, that the triple word score in the lower left corner is the most threatening spot available on this board for sure. So you do still have to worry about the Moggs hook right here. That's still available. With 3 out of the 4 S's left to be played, this S right here is the only one that's been played to this point in the game midway through. So you do have to worry about Moggs, but other than that, fade is definitely more dangerous. It makes a lot of sense to try to block that E hook. There's also the word fado as well. You can put an O there as a hook, and you've got to worry about plays in that spot too. So normally, if you're in David's shoes here, you definitely do want to keep that blank on your rack and shoot for an even bigger play in the future, like a bingo. But on this board, there is no place to fit a bingo down. Try to imagine, where is a 7-letter word even going to play on this board, and you'll see it's basically impossible. So that does make the blank a little more expendable than usual, even though it does have some value to potentially become an S and hook Moggs. The blank isn't quite as valuable as usual because it's not going to let you get those bingos down on such a difficult board. So I actually really do like David's instinct here, and I think it's okay to burn it and play something there if you don't see any better options. One idea, though, is you could potentially, so we already went through with guy being a good option. If you don't see the fady hook, another idea is to play YU in the corner. Again, these are 2-letter words that are only available in the Collins dictionary, so don't worry if you haven't seen those if you play Merriam-Webster, but that's an idea to keep your blank, even though it does leave that fade spot completely open for your opponent. That is one way to go. So David says that he played TIE in that lower left corner. It's also possible that you could just switch out that I for a Y here, and you get a bunch more points to the triple word score. But there is a nice advantage of keeping the Y because it scores very well in a couple of these good triple letter scores on the board. If David's able to draw an A, E, or O, the odds of him getting a really nice scoring Y play in that spot are pretty good. So I think given that David is in a tie game, you can see it's 190 to 190. I think it makes a lot of sense for him to protect this spot at all costs, including burning the blank. I definitely think that's better than exchanging here, just because you do have some hope if you keep your Y to play in these spots. And of course, if you think about the fadey hook, you've got a really good option here that scores well and keeps the blank for you next turn. So hopefully, David, that was helpful to you to hear that analysis of this situation. I think your instincts are right on, and you're thinking about this board and your tiles in this situation in very much the right way. So thank you so much for the question. So our next question for this episode comes from Lee Forey, who sends in the following board position. Her opponent has just bingoed with C going, and she has a very unappealing set of letters here, 6 vowels and just 1 consonant. Unfortunately, not even Dr. Scrabble can help very much with situations like this, and probably the only word even remotely worth putting on the board here is F-E-E, fee, alongside the first F of cuffs for, I think, 16 points. Even that doesn't look very promising because you still keep 4 vowels and just 1 consonant for next turn. So I'm definitely thinking exchanging a bunch of tiles, probably just keeping EN on your rack is the best way to go. And I know that's uninspiring, but not every position in Scrabble has a satisfying answer. Sometimes you just have to pick the best of a really weak set of options. But as for advice, I can see that based on the layout of this board, unless Lee's previous play was an exchange, her last play had to be either SEX underneath a kneel or cuffs through the U of Duros. So let's assume her previous play was cuffs. In that case, let me make sure I get the S in there. She used 4 consonants and no vowels if that was her previous play. So saving some of those consonants instead of playing them could have saved her from this vowel nightmare that she's experiencing on this turn. But let's go to the other option. If her previous play was sex in this spot, you actually don't need to use your S here as a blank. Just EX in this spot would have scored almost as well, and it would have kept that super valuable blank for next turn, where she could have used it to escape from this jam in this situation rather than exchange if she chose to do so. So depending on which of these 2 plays was her previous play, there may have been options available to her that could have helped her avert this disaster that she's experiencing right now. But once you're in this situation, there's really no great option. Dr. Scrabble doesn't have a wonderful play to bail you out of this mess. You just have to be aware that sometimes when you get into these situations, it's because of choices that you've made earlier in the game. And even saying that, sometimes these situations will come up when you've made the perfect choices all game long. There's no way you're going to avoid situations like this 100% of the time, but just paying as much attention as you can to those little nuances between plays leading up to these situations, you can avoid more of them than you probably expect. To receive a consultation from Dr. Scrabble, take a screenshot of a board that stumps you. On an iPhone, this is done by pressing the home button and lock button at the same time, for example. And when you see Dr. Scrabble on the Scrabble Go Facebook page, simply post your screenshot as a comment in the thread. It helps if you add a specific question you'd like me to answer. I really look forward to hearing from you.